Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Punyavani Paschacharisham Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvesha Sunyavadi Astacha Deshatharine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasmadi Gaurabhaktavedanta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasmadi Gaurabhaktavedanta Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballava Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana 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 Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Go Premanandi, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa, Harivraj Acharya Ashtatar Satishlesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Ananta Kota Vaishnavinda ki, Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki, Prem Se Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Janananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta, Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath, Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan ki, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Jagannath Puri Dham ki, Ganga Maya ki, Jamuna Maya ki, Tulasi Deva ki, Bhakti Deva ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Lord Chaitanya's Hari Nam Sankirtan ki, Prihat Madanga ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki, Gaur Premanandi, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to the assembled devotees, All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Sri Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Name Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pastachare Shatarine Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. Welcome all the devotees. This morning, afternoon, this evening, we will be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, continuing our hearing of Lord Kapila Dev's instructions to his mother Devahuti. Today we're on text number 24, the third canto, chapter 25. Please repeat. Ta ete sadavaha sadvi sarvasanga vivajitaha sangaha teshu ata te prachaha sangadosha hara ite ta ete sadavak sadvi sarvasanga vivajitaha sangaste shvatate pratya sangadosha harahite. Ta ete sadavak sadhi sarvasanga vivajitaha sangaste shvattate pratya sangadosha harahite. Ta ete sadavak sadvi sarvasanga vivajitaha sangaste shvattate pratya sangadosha harahite. Ta ete sadavak sadvi sarvasanga vivajitaha sangaste shvatate pratya sangadosha harahite. Word for word. Ta ete, those very. Sadavaha, devotees. Sadvi, virtuous lady. Sarva, all. Sangha, attachments. Vivajitaha, freed from. Sangaha, attachment. Teshu, unto them. Atha, hence. Te, by you. Prachaha, must be sought. Sangha dosha, the pernicious effects of material attachment. Haraha, counteracts of. Counteractors of. He, indeed. Te, they. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Kapila Dev continues, O my mother, O virtuous lady, these are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You must seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Kapila Muni herein advises his mother Devahuti that if she wants to be free from material attachment, she should increase her attachment for the sadhus, or devotees, who are completely free from all material attachment. In the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, verse 5, it is stated, who is qualified to enter into the kingdom of Godhead. It is said there, Nirmana moha jita sangadosha. This refers to one who is completely freed from the puffed up condition very rich, opulent, or respectable. But if he at all wants to transfer himself to the spiritual kingdom, back home, back to Godhead, then he has to be freed from the puffed up condition of material possessiveness, because that is a false position. The word moha used here means the false understanding that one is rich or poor. In this material world, the conception that one is very rich or very poor, or any such consciousness in connection with material existence is false, because this body itself is false or temporary. A pure soul who is prepared to be freed from this material entanglement must first of all be free from the association of the three modes of nature. Our consciousness at the present moment is polluted because of association with the three modes of nature. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, the same principle is stated. It is advised, jita sangadoshaha. One should be freed from the contaminated association of the three modes of material nature. We have to seek the association. Here also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is confirmed. A pure devotee who is preparing to transfer himself to the spiritual kingdom is also freed from the association of the three modes of material nature. We have to seek the association of such devotees. For this reason, we have begun the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. There are many mercantile, scientific, and other associations in human society to develop a particular type of educational consciousness. But there is no association which helps one to get free from all material association. If anyone has reached a stage where he must become free from this material contamination, then he has to seek the association of devotees, wherein Krishna consciousness is exclusively cultured. One can thereby become freed from all material association. Because a devotee is freed from all contaminated material association, he is not affected by the miseries of material existence. Even though he appears to be in the material world, he is not affected by the miseries of the material world. How is it possible? There is a very good example in the activities of the cat. The cat carries her kittens in her mouth. And when she kills a rat, she also carries the booty in her mouth. Thus both are carried in the mouth of the cat. But they are in different conditions. The kitten feels comfort in the mouth of the mother, whereas when the rat is carried in the mouth of the cat feels the blows of death. Similarly, those who are sadhu or devotees engaged in Krishna consciousness in the transcendental service of the Lord do not feel the contamination of material misery, whereas those who are not devotees in Krishna consciousness actually feel the miseries of material existence. One should therefore give up the association of materialistic persons, seek the associations of persons engaged in Krishna consciousness, and by such association, he will benefit in spiritual advancement. By their words and instructions, he will be able to cut off his attachment to material existence. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The essence of these teachings of Lord Kapila Deva is association and the effects of association. Basically speaking, we are products in our present conditioned state of lifetimes of association with the three modes of material nature, and living entities conditioned by the three modes of nature. Sometimes Prabhupada gives the example of a thorn. When we have a thorn stuck in our side, it may be painful, but with another thorn we remove it. Similarly, by association, we become entangled in this material world. So when we have the association, Mahat Sevandwara Mahurupi Mukte, Tamodwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam, when we have the association of the great devotees, the Mahat Seva, the sort of opportunity to associate with the great devotees, then the gateway to liberation is open. If we associate with materialistic persons, those too much attached to the opposite sex and too much attached to the bodily concept of life, then we become entangled and the gateway to hell is opened. So it's by association that our consciousness can be changed. Association is not just a physical coming together of individuals, living entities, but it refers also to the environment which we live in. We would say our daily regime, different modes of nature at different times of the day affect our consciousness. You could say the words that we hear or read, associate with various types of musical sounds. Pretty much everything is one way or the other, either within the modes of nature or transcendental to the modes of nature. It's by association, and in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes also how the consciousness of the living entity is just like the air. When the air passes over a beautiful rose bed, the air takes on the fragrance of roses. When that same air passes over a field of stool, it takes on the fragrance of stool. So similarly, the consciousness of the living entity is just like that. Just like the air. According to the association, it takes on varieties of flavors. We heard the other day how Hiranyakashipu compared the living entity. Just like when we become before a crystal stone, as in the Hari Bhakti Siddhadaya, we reflect, or it is reflected. The consciousness, like the crystal, reflects whatever comes before it. So association is very important. So if we want to become free, as this verse says, from the pernicious effects of material contamination. Pernicious, if this word is not common in your vocabulary, means evil or very bad, nasty effects, unwanted effects from association or the contamination of material association. So if we do want to come free to that, as we become contaminated or conditioned, our consciousness conditioned by that pernicious association. Similarly, when we come into the association, as this verse is emphasizing, the purport is emphasizing the association of those who are not under the influence of the three modes of nature. It's not a question of just coming to the mode of goodness, although the mode of goodness may be conducive, you could say, for the development of our Krishna consciousness. It is not the cause of our development of Krishna consciousness. It can also be a block to our Krishna consciousness if that is our main focus. It may be conducive. But if we want to get free of the effects of all the modes, rise above the modes, Arjuna, Krishna says to Arjuna, be transcendental to all of them. Even the Vedas mostly deal with the three modes of nature. We see in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the three modes of material nature. At the end, he's emphasizing that transcending these three modes of material nature, come to the spiritual platform, rise above them. So we have to associate with personalities, with activities, with environments which are favorable to cultivate or to develop, nurture our arising of our consciousness to transcend the three moments. So, but specifically, this verse is emphasizing, Kapila Deva is emphasizing the importance, once it's searched out, the association of those devotees who are freed of the modes of nature. In his commentary on this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes very briefly in one line, 2 lines, that the meaning of this is that we have to associate with those who are not interested in dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Mostly in human society, these are the main interests of living entities. Piety, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation from reactions or liberation from the material world. Mostly this is the interest of virtually everybody. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says we have to find someone whose interest is beyond that, Pramartha Krishna Mahan, one whose interest is beyond these normal 4 arthas or the purushartha, the highest. We have someone who has the highest purpose in life, Krishna Pramartha Mahan, whose business is higher above these 4 basic objectives of human beings, whose objective is Krishna Pramartha Mahan, one who desires to give everything to Krishna. There is no other object in life other than pleasing Krishna. By associating with such a sadhu, and this is also the meaning of a sadhu, one who is situated in sat, on the spiritual platform, or sadhvi, as this verse mentions. Lord Devahuti is addressed here as sadhvi. But sadhvi also means a very virtuous lady. Sometimes female sadhus are known as sadhvis. So we have to associate with such great personalities if you want to rise above the modes. Of course, just by associating with them, even without interacting, it's a tremendous benefit. Even a moment's association with great devotee. Sadhu Sangha Sarvasha, Sadhu Shastakoi, Lavamatra Sadhu Sangha Sarvasiddhi Hoi. But a moment's association with such great devotees, Lavamatra, can completely free one from all the bondage in this material world. It can help deliver us just that moment, because it begins the process, or the change of heart begins. That's why Prabhupada says here we have started this international society for Krishna consciousness, so we can get that association and give that association to others. So important is association. We've been hearing about that more or less in every single session so far. The special effect of that association is, which we'll read now. I'm going to read something from a beautiful article by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. It's called The Search for Truth. This is just a little excerpt from that article of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. The only duties of sadhus is to cut away all the accumulated wicked propensities of every individual. That's their business, to cut it away. This alone is the causeless, natural desire of all the sadhus. If we read in the Narada Bhakti Sutra, there is described, Narada Muni describes that the cause of the awakening of devotion within our hearts, of genuine devotion, is the association of sadhus, the association of devotees. Bhakti cannot be, let's say, awoken by jnana, it cannot be awoken by austerities, it cannot be awoken simply by study of varieties of scriptures or by karma or any. It's awoken, or let's say, it appears in the form of the pure devotees of the Lord. By their presence, bhakti, we get the association of bhakti. And we all know that bhakti is the cause of Krishna's let's say, revealing himself accordingly. The pure devotees, they are just like now we have persons who are carrying viruses. And even if we don't know, anyone who comes in contact with them may become contaminated by that virus. So similarly, devotees, pure they are, the more powerful is the effect. They carry this, we could call it a virus, or we could call it whatever, liberating the mercy. They carry the mercy of the Lord, and they deliver that mercy wherever they go. So we should, their desire, their natural desire of all the sadhus is to cut out the accumulated wicked propensities which we're all presently covered by. Worldly people possess a double nature. They express one kind of sentiment, but internally cherish a different purpose. Moreover, they want to advertise this duplicity as a mark of liberalism or love of harmony. Yes, don't disturb. Sometimes Prabhupada will be giving classes in the early days, 1966, and people become, why, Swamiji, you're disturbing the vibrations. We just want harmony here. Let us all harmonize together. Sometimes the young hippies would say. That's not the point. That we all have our wicked propensities and we want to accept each other's wicked propensities. That is not rising above the free modes of material nature. It is accommodating the calls of our being in the modes of nature. So the pure devotees, they want to live. It's not an affront on anybody. It's just a genuine consciousness of compassion to deliver us from our fallen condition of life, where we're so attached to our conditioned state of consciousness. So they sometimes are quite strong in this. And duplicity, meaning to say here that internally we cherish, like we express one sentiment outside, and internally we're cherishing something else. There's a duplicitousness is the great one of them. You could say that practically Siddhanta Maharaj describes it as practically the greatest obstacle on the path of bhakti, whereas simplicity is the hallmark of a Vaishnava. Simplicity means straightforwardness. There's no duplicity there. Inside, outside. Sincerity. There's no no duplicity at all. Those who are unwilling to show any duplicity wish to be frank and straightforward. Or in other words, to exercise unambiguously the function of the soul. Such really sincere persons are called sectarian and orthodox by those who practice duplicity. So in the world where everyone's accepting their own concoctions or their own varieties of what they consider to be truths or whatever, and they consider those who stick strictly to the path of truth without any duplicity, they consider them to be sectarian, orthodox. Now, of course, this is you could say a point of contention in some ways, because anyone can claim this, but it has to be seen. The sadhu has to be seen by their qualities, not just by their declaration, but by the qualities which they bear. Sadhu is judged in this way, by their behavior, religious principles being established by the behavior of a Vaishnava. So you have to find out that Vaishnava, those devotees who are on this path. We will not, to cultivate the society only of those, we will cultivate the society only of those persons who are straightforward. We will not keep company with any person who is not so. We may have to associate in our lives with so many people. We don't associate intimately. This is the meaning. We don't become entangled in their duplicitous worlds or their worlds of trying to satisfy their desires within the modes of nature, which is generally the case. People are heralded as sadhus, mahatmas, etc., if they're very expert in the material world, either in helping us to establish this mode or that mode. They're often worshipped and heralded by people in general, even though they may be very much in the mode of ignorance or passion. They're often given great credit. So Vaishnava doesn't want to associate with that. That doesn't just mean physically, it means hearing them, reading about them, etc., etc. Sometimes for preaching, of course, we have to have some kind of knowledge, but not that we delve into it, indulging into their various activities of sense gratification. We will cultivate the society only of those who are straightforward. We will not keep company with any person who is not so. We must by all means avoid bad company. We are, many times in the scriptures, it describes association of worldly minded people is just like, it's better to be in a cage of fire or with tigers, etc., etc. So, because at least that may only damage our body, but the association of materialistic persons covers our consciousness, keeps us far away, entangles us in the material world. We must by all means avoid bad company. We are advised to keep at a distance of 100 cubits. What's a cubit? What's a cubit? I don't know what a cubit is. Anyway, a long way. 100 cubits from animals of the horned species. We should observe the same caution in regard to all insincere persons. Keeping a distance, of course, for our work, for our social life, sometimes for our studies. That is not possible. That is real social distancing. That's extreme, 100 cubits between, away from more or less everybody. And that's why many times sadhus or person on this path go into hibernation. But that is not the mood of a pure devotee. Pure devotees don't do that. We'll hear about that in a minute. It is for this reason that the Bhagavatam instructs us to turn over a new leaf. Persons of good sense must entirely give up all association with bad company and cultivate close association with the sadhus. There is no doubt that the words of the sadhu possess the power of destroying the evil propensities of one's mind. The sadhus in this way benefit everyone who associates with him. There are many things which we do not disclose to the sadhu. The real sadhu makes us speak out what we keep concealed in our hearts. Yes, this is our challenge. We hide things in our hearts. We don't like them to be revealed sometimes. So sometimes we may avoid the sadhu, or we associate with the sadhu on the surface level and not on the level of actually entering into, let's say, the real association of a sadhu. The very word sadhu, the real sadhu makes us speak out what we keep concealed in our hearts. He then applies the knife. Pretty heavy. This is an operation going on. The very word sadhu has no other meaning than this. He stands in front of the block with the uplifted sacrificial knife in his hand. The sensuous desires of man are like the goats. The sadhu stands there to kill those desires by the merciful stroke of the keen edge of the sacrificial knife in the form of unpleasant language. If the sadhu turns into my flatterer, then he does me harm. He becomes my enemy. If he gives us flattery, then we are led to the road that brings enjoyment, but no real well-being. It means material enjoyment, but it doesn't release us from the material world. One time, Srila Prabhupada, he was giving a lecture in Gorakhpur in India, and he was speaking quite heavily about the sadhus and how the business of the sadhu is to, cut out the material desires, etc., of the living entity. And Prabhupada was also citing how so many sadhus are misleading people and flattering them and indulging them in sense gratification, or indulging them in the, the falsity of considering oneself the Supreme Lord, etc., etc. So one lady, she became somewhat, let's say, upset by Srila Prabhupada's words, and she said, Swamiji, you were speaking very strongly, very strong words, but sadhus, they don't speak, they speak very nicely, very kindly. You were speaking very harshly. And Prabhupada said, oh, your idea of compassion is if a person has a boil on their arm, your idea is to go on the arm. Maybe you relieve the burning sensation for a few moments, but it doesn't remove the boil. Sadhu's business is to remove the boil. It's like a surgeon may have the responsibility to remove some contamination or some, whatever, limb even sometimes, to save the patient. So the sadhu's business is also like that. Said when a real sadhu, he doesn't just go, but he takes a knife and he slashes it out. He cuts it out. It sounds very harsh, it sounds very painful. And to some degree it is, to have our hearts opened up. We tend to hold on to our natures, our conditioning, our habits, our whatever it is, our self-centered objectives and so on, which come out in our behavior, or let's say our relationships with others. They may not come out in words so much, but they come out in our way we deal with people, or the way we avoid people, etc., etc. And try to avoid situations where we'll be exposed. We don't like to be exposed, generally speaking. But this is the process of devotional service, to become released. Just like in the case of, we were discussing today, in the case of King Prataparudra, when Lord Chaitanya was not giving him darshan, it was only when King Prataparudra came on the direction of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, where he took off his kingly dress and he approached the Lord in a very humble state. Now, it doesn't depend on the external dress, it really is the internal dress. Those who are freed, Charya Vaishnava Seva Nishtaya Payecha Keva. That that verse go. Vishaya Charya Kape Shuddha Hapimon Kabihama Heravo Shri Vrindavan. If we want to enter into Vrindavan, then we have to become freed, not just of the external behavior of which we describe as sinful activity, but the internal also has to become cleansed, purified of internal motivations other than developing those favorable to serving Krishna. It has to be completely freed of all material desire to enter into Vrindavan. So the sadhu's business is this. He wants us to enter into Vrindavan. It's not the person that the sadhu is seems to be angry with, or whatever we call it. It's the fact that we're covered over and we're not bringing pleasure to Krishna. So he wants us to bring pleasure to Krishna, which automatically brings pleasure to the self. That's our real well-being. So-called happiness of this world is the one that simply entangles us. Sadhu wants to free us from that endeavor and to help us to achieve our real well-being by existing, our consciousness being that which pleases Krishna. So with his strong words, he cuts out all of that which is unfavorable to Krishna. We may not like it. It's like when we have an operation, we may not like it. Nobody likes to be cut. Nobody likes to be exposed, having a tooth pulled out, all these things. But in the long run, they're for our welfare. They're for our well-being. Well, the sadhu is like that. I'm going to read now Srila Prabhupada. In this little book, it's called The Perfection of Yoga, a book we may know about, but we may not read. But here Srila Prabhupada said, this is in the chapter Yoga as Body and Mind Control. As we know, yoga, one of the main principles of yoga is to control the mind and senses. For what reason? That may vary. But it's a general principle of yoga to control the senses by various practices. And the mind, as we hear from the Bhagavad Gita, can be our friend or our enemy. Mind is that which we're experiencing the material world on the platform of the mind. Pain and pleasure are experienced on the platform of the mind because our consciousness is basically focused on the mind. And then consequently, whatever is in the mind through the consciousness is what we experience. In itself, the mind has nothing to do. It is simply waiting to be trained. In other words, it's kind of neutral. Some is described in the mode of goodness. It only becomes polluted or contaminated by various thoughts, etc. But in itself, it is neutral. And it's how we associate. According to how we associate, the mind becomes filled with varieties of thoughts. And it has to be trained. This is the practice of yoga, to train our mind so that the mind does not dwell on material sense gratification. We know from Bhagavad Gita, if we dwell on the objects of the senses with the consciousness, we become dwelling on it. Means basically speaking the consciousness. Through the consciousness, we're dwelling on various pictures and thoughts that appear to us through the mind, and we're dwelling upon them. And thus we become very attached to them, and we become very entangled. We lose our intelligence. It ends up just trying to satisfy those various thoughts within the mind instead of say, controlling them. It becomes controlled by them. And it is best trained through association. Desire is the function of the mind. One desires according to his association. So if the mind is to act as a friend, there must be good association. It's not just a question of controlling the mind. It's not just a question of clearing out the mind of pernicious thoughts, mundane thoughts. It's a question of association so the mind becomes full of good thoughts. The best association is a sadhu. That is, a Krishna-conscious person, or one who is striving for spiritual realization. There are those who are striving for temporary things. Matter and the body are temporary, and if one only engages himself for bodily pleasure, he is conditioned by temporary things. But if he engages himself in self-realization, then he is engaged in something permanent, sat. Obviously, if one is intelligent, he will associate with those who are trying to elevate themselves to the platform of self-realization through one of the various forms of yoga. The result will be that those who are sadhu or realized will be able to sever his attachment to material association. This is the great advantage of good association. And this is what ISKCON has been formed for. Prabhupada didn't form a society as a social club, but as an opportunity for people to become freed of the pernicious effects of material association by association with sadhus. We may not consider ourselves sadhus, but if we're following the path of the sadhus, following the directives of Srila Prabhupada and the sadhus, then although we may ourselves not feel that we're on such an elevated platform, nonetheless, because we're actually following Srila Prabhupada instructions, then associating with such devotees can help others to also become freed from the pernicious effects of material association or the entanglement in the three modes of nature. And it is Krishna who releases us from those modes. As we see in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the second chapter, there's a very nice section there, which we have mentioned before, how serving the Vaishnavas is a great activity. We develop an attraction for hearing the message of Krishna by serving them. And as we develop an attraction, all the dirty things in the heart are removed. And the more we hear and chant Srimad Bhagavatam and render service to the pure devotees of the Lord, that we develop, it awakens in our heart love of Godhead, and the effects of the three modes of material nature are removed, the effects of the modes of passion, and the effects of the mode of ignorance are removed, and one comes to the platform of pure goodness, and one becomes very fixed in that situation beyond all anarthas. In that steady state, one is no longer affected, even in the presence of material suffering. One is not affected by it. One doesn't identify with it. It's an external experience. We've seen that in the case of some of our elevated Vaishnavas in ISKCON who've been in situations where, physically speaking, they were in terribly difficult situations, be it Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, who was suffering for a long time, many varieties of cancer, or so there's Sridhar Swami Maharaj, who also had so many different physical illnesses. And when he was asked, it must be very painful, Maharaj. And Maharaj said, Yeah, the pain is there, but you don't have to suffer. In other words, the pain is there. You can't deny that there is pain. It's a physical reaction from material combinations. But with it, when one identifies with Krishna, and one doesn't have to suffer the pain. Even the material world, we sometimes get this experience. A person who's so much absorbed in something does not even notice that there is some very painful situation in their body because their mind is so much absorbed in something else. So the same principle is there. When we become absorbed in devotional service, absorbed in hearing and chanting about Krishna, absorbed in chanting the holy names of Krishna or whatever service it may be to Krishna, then we're no longer absorbed in the sufferings of this world. Or we could go deeper. The causes of the suffering is one thing, the pain on the surface is another thing, the mentality which causes us to act in such a way which results in karma of various kinds. So the devotee does not waste their time in thinking of things which will entangle us in this material world. And that is a special mercy of the association of the sadhu, is that they engage us so much in acts of devotion, particularly in kirtan, particularly in chanting the holy names, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and in various other activities to keep us busy. So one time Prabhupada said that we cannot chant all the time. Therefore, I have to think of so many activities to give you to keep us busy. Otherwise, we will be busy doing nonsense or wasting our time lazy, just spacing out, speculating, delving into our own whatever consciousness, thinking that this is spiritual or something. But Prabhupada used to keep us so busy. We had no time to think. One time, Janananda Prabhu, the great Charya, you could say, in ISKCON, was asked by Dhanavir Prabhu, who was the younger devotee of that. But I'm too busy trying to serve Prabhupada's mission. We don't have time, just fully engaged in devotional service. That doesn't mean being fanatical or being, one has to be balanced. Not that when just work, we have to hear and chant as well. Otherwise, we'll start thinking we are the doer. And I am good at this, and I am doing this, and I did that, and so on. Proper hearing from the proper source helps us to understand things in proper perspective and release us from this danger of seeing ourselves in the center. This is the real pernicious effect of material association, is to see ourselves in the center, to see everything in relationship with me, whereas the sadhus see everything in relationship with Krishna, and they engage us in such a way that gradually this consciousness, mentality and then consciousness, we see everything in relation with Krishna also. Because everything they give us to do is directly in relationship with Krishna. Therefore, that is association with the sadhu when we follow their instructions, and it will gradually have this reformatory effect upon our consciousness. So Prabhupada continues. Obviously, if one is intelligent, he will associate with those who are trying to elevate themselves to the platform of self-realization. The result will be that those who are sadhu or realized will be able to sever the attachment to our attachment to material association. This is the great advantage of good association. For instance, Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Why does he speak it? He speaks it to cut off his attachment to this material affection. That doesn't sound very attractive to material people at all. There's this material affection, which is the cause of our bondage in this material world. We all have so much material, not affection, material affection. Affection is the nature of the soul. But in this material world, it becomes material affection. And it keeps us bound up. Sindanti kopadas tasya kona kriti tavatin. The devotees of the Lord, they cut karma granta nibandanam. They cut this knot of material affection by remembering the personality of Godhead. They cut through this knot. And they remind us of Krishna. So when we remember Krishna, the knot of material affection can be cut. It's a very pleasant way of cutting it. It's not, we heard earlier on, it sounded a bit harsh. But that harsh words are not necessarily the harsh words that we relate to in this material world. They may be sometimes, But in principle, those words are words of instruction to help us remember Krishna. And that frees us by remembering Krishna's instruction. When Arjuna was perplexed, he became very perplexed after the departure of Krishna. When Krishna decided to wind up his pastimes, Arjuna became very perplexed. His mind was reeling. But then again, he remembered the instructions of Krishna. All the trash in his mind was dissipated. By remembering the instructions of Krishna, even we read on our Bhagavad Gita, Mahatma Gandhi, as he's known, Gandhi, says whenever he feels in that doubt, and feels, hopeless, he opens up Bhagavad Gita and reads the instructions of Krishna, and immediately all the clouds are removed. So by association with the instructions of the Lord, the instructions of the pure devotee, hearing the pastimes like Krishna book, reading the Krishna book, reading from the pure devotee the pastimes of Krishna. In this way, it clears up our consciousness. It's transcendental. We're associating with the sadhu, with the Bhagavat, person and book Bhagavat. And this is the method of cleansing our consciousness when we get that most fortunate opportunity. Because Arjuna is attracted to things that are impeding the execution of his own duty. Krishna severs these things. His things were, he was thinking in the mode of goodness and material compassion and religious statements which supported it, and all kinds of social status situations. In other words, identifying with the body, even if it were in the mode of goodness, so to speak. Krishna severed that affection. That was the purpose of Bhagavad Gita, to cut that attachment which he had. To cut something, a sharp instrument is required. And to cut the mind from its attachment, sharp words are often required. The sadhu or teacher shows no mercy in using sharp words to sever the student's mind from material attractions. By speaking the truth uncompromisingly, he's able to sever the bondage. For example, at the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks sharply to Arjuna by telling him that although he speaks like a learned man, he's actually a fool number one. If we actually want detachment from this material world, we should be prepared to accept such cutting words from the spiritual master. Compromise and flattery have no effect where strong words are required. It's amazing that we already had the example of the boil. But if somebody is, whatever, they're doing something wrong and you just try to, sympathize with them or something. It doesn't, or eating things which will cause their own suffering. That's not being compassionate. We have to sometimes be strong or doing something which is detrimental to their spiritual advancement. So the sadhus, they can be very strong sometimes. We have a very nice example in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, chapter 13. Maybe you can hand me that book. It's the yellow book, people. In Bhagavatam, it's a beautiful incident of the sadhu. Although not appearing maybe in the usual guise of a sadhu in the Kuru dynasty, one of the great devotees mentioned therein is Vidura, and Vidura was, according he'd gone away on pilgrimage during the Battle of Kurukshetra, and after the great battle, when he returned to Hastinapura, where Dhritarashtra was still considering himself as the head of the dynasty, though his sons had all been killed. At that time, Vidura came back. He tried many times to remove Dhritarashtra's false, change his consciousness, his false understanding of things. But Dhritarashtra was determined and was not hearing properly. So now was the time. Dhritarashtra is getting old. We don't need to wait till we're old. We should do it now. But Dhritarashtra was very old. At that time, Vidura returned to Hastinapura, and Yudhishthira greeted him. "My lord," he said to Vidura, Yudhishthira, "my lord, devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified, because you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage." And that's the main characteristic of a Vaishnava, is that they have no separate desire from Krishna. There's no duplicity there. Their only desire is to serve Krishna's desire, Krishna's will. They carry that will of Krishna in their heart, just like Prabhupada did when he came to the West. He carried the will of the Lord in his heart. There was no other desire. There was no other motive. Prabhupada had no motive when he came to the West. He had no motive other than that, just to serve the will of the Lord through his spiritual master's instruction. He wasn't coming to the West to get name, fame, to get education, to get, whatever, sense enjoyment of various kinds. When he left Bombay, Mr. Choksi, the secretary of Srimati Maharaj, said to Srila Prabhupada, he said, Swamiji, I know why you want to go to New York. You want to get some sense enjoyment there. Prabhu, you don't talk such nonsense. He was kind of joking. Prabhupada got quite strong. Don't talk such nonsense. Because most people go to New York or to America or whatever it is for material reasons. But a sadhu, if he goes at all, he's a place of pilgrimage. He goes there to cut out the pernicious effects of material association by speaking the truth and by giving the process where people can apply in their lives so that lives can change by associating with the process of devotional service. This changes our consciousness. So then Dhritarashtra was sitting there. Vidura then approached his brother and began to speak. Insurmountable, eternal time imperceptibly overcomes those who are too much attached to family affairs. This is the greatest entanglement of the living entity, practically speaking, is the entanglement in our family affection. Of course, it has to be there in the course of our duty, but it's not the goal of our lives. It's not the goal of our lives. The goal even of our affection in our family should be connected to Krishna, to try to help them to become Krishna conscious by our own example and by our loving guidance to our family, to try to help us to become Krishna conscious. And people are always engrossed in these thoughts. Mahatma Vidura knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhritarashtra saying, My dear king, please get out of here immediately. He didn't beat around the bush. Get out immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you. When we're attached in this world, this is another of the pernicious effects. And the all-pervading one in this material world is this defensive tendency to defend our concepts, to defend our bodies, to defend our mind, to defend this, that, and the other, or whatever we identify with. Of course, there's a place for defense, but not when it impedes our spiritual growth. So in the case of Dhritarashtra, it was based on a false concept of thinking himself the emperor. Get out of here immediately. Get out, get out. He's saying, the frightful situation, because you're afraid of death, you're afraid of losing what you've got. We have nothing to be afraid of in reality, because nothing is ours. This is the first illusion, thinking it is ours, and this is me, and this is mine. Get out of this mentality. Get out. The frightful situation cannot be remedied by any person in this material world. Not by anyone in this world. No one can help us. Nobody in this world can genuinely help the soul. Nobody. We're all in the prison. We're all in the boat sinking. Nobody. We're in a stone boat, and no matter who else is in the stone boat, there's nothing they can do about it. We're all sinking in the material world. Only a sadhu can help us. Only one who helps to cut this knot of material attachment. My Lord, he addressed his brother as his Lord, because he was, all along, he was senior, he was the king and so on. My Lord, it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as eternal time, that has approached us all. And especially relevant in our day and age right now, where people are faced They're always faced at every moment. There's the same reality as there. They've been a little bit more aware of, you could say, of the fear of death, of disease, old age, and you name it. Whoever is under the influence of Supreme Kala, eternal time, must surrender his most dear life, and what to speak of other things such as wealth, honor, children, land, and home. Your father, brother, well-wishers, and sons are all dead and passed away. You yourself have expended the major portion of your life. Your body is now overtaken by invalidity, and you are living in the home of another. We're all living in the home of another in one sense. We think it's their own, but it's not. We just don't recognize it, and we're misusing. If you stay in someone else's house and you misuse the facility, we get in trouble. So we're staying in God's house. We don't recognize it, we don't accept it, but we misuse it. So therefore we become entangled in karma. We become entangled more and more in birth and death, etc. When we use it properly, then of course it can be favorable to our spiritual progress. But religion is to help teach us how to use it materially favorably, and spiritual life is how to use it in such a way that we can get released altogether. Not just get a better apartment, but to get released altogether from the material world. You have been blind from your very birth, he goes on, and recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened, and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. Alas, how powerful are the hopes of a living being to continue his life. Verily, you are living just like a household dog, and are eating remnants of food given by Bhima. Because tried to poison Bhima, etc. And now he's eating the remnants of food given by Bhima, which is humiliating. So his words are very, very strong, but their intention is to release Dhritarashtra from the bondage of illusion which he is in. There is no need to live a degraded life and subsist on the charity of those whom you tried to kill by arson and poisoning. You also insulted one of their wives and usurped their kingdom and wealth. Despite your unwillingness to die and your desire to live, even at the cost of honor and prestige, your miserly body will certainly dwindle and deteriorate like an old garment. He is called undisturbed who goes to an unknown, remote place and freed from all obligations, quits his material body when it has become useless. He is certainly a first-class man who awakens and understands either by himself or from others the falsity and misery of this material world, and thus leaves home and depends fully on the personality of Godhead, residing within his heart. And it doesn't mean necessarily a physical transference, it means a change of consciousness. We're so attached to our home inside us, this is me, and so on and so forth. Lord Chaitanya, one of his primary cardinal instructions or statements, premises, that we're not this body. There's that verse. I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, nor am I a Shudra, nor a Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, or Sannyasi. I identify myself only as the eternal servant of the servant of the Lord. This is our only actual identity. All other identities are false. They may be used in helping us to develop that consciousness. We may, whatever situation we're in due to our desire and karma, we have to live with it, and we try to utilize it to our best capacity for becoming Krishna conscious by following the direction of those who are Krishna conscious, how to utilize our conditioned mind and body and senses, etc. So Vidura is very strong in his words to his brother to try to cut that knot. Please, therefore, leave for the north immediately. Leave for the north immediately generally means never looking back. We don't turn back. It's one-way traffic. Don't look back. Don't start lamenting, etc. Go to that place. And here it says, of course it says here, go to a secluded place, a remote place, freed of all obligations. That remote place doesn't necessarily mean a physical place. It means a place where there's no more effect of the whirlpools of material existence. And that place where one is, it's remote in the sense from the material nature. As the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes that which is day for the introspective sage is night for the materialistic man, and vice versa. For them, it's a remote place, or it doesn't exist at all. We go to that place where there's no more effect of the modes of nature. In our consciousness, by trying to fill our consciousness, fill our minds, and consequently our consciousness, in thoughts of Krishna, in how to serve Krishna's mission, how to spread Krishna consciousness, how whatever, but somehow or another, some thoughts which are favorable in our progress towards devotional service. He goes on. Please, therefore, leave for the north immediately, without letting your relatives know, for soon that time will approach which will diminish the good qualities of man. Kali Yuga is about to begin. Leave now. And here we are, sat in the middle of Kali Yuga, surrounded, literally surrounded by no end of material temptation, of material affection, of whatever form it may take, of all kinds of sense objects, and being brought up in a situation, being exposed practically from birth to materialistic. Just like we see in the Krishna book, the first demon who comes to try to kill Krishna is Putana, who comes to try to poison. She comes in the form of a witch, in the form of a beautiful woman who comes to offer her breast milk to Krishna. She's actually a witch. But she comes like that to actually to offer her breast milk to Krishna. In other words, to nurture Krishna. The first, in one sense, you could say the first guru, the baby, is the mother who offers her breast milk. So she came like that. But she is like that. And that's the unfortunate situation in almost every case on the planet. When the child is born, they're immediately exposed to bodily concept of life and all varieties of non-Krishna conscious endeavors and goals, etc., in their education lives, everything like this. So such personalities who condition a living entity are compared to Putana, who calls the living entity basically to kill their spirit, the tender opportunity of the living entity to become Krishna conscious. His endeavor is made to kill that from the very birth itself. You are the body. And basically bodily concept of life. Now it's understandable the affection of the mother will be, in that direction. So it's not exactly an exact physical analogy, so to speak. But it's when the living entity or the newborn child is raised in a completely materialistic lifestyle. We're doing the greatest disservice to the living entity's opportunity of this human form of life, which is meant for God realization. Well, most people don't know that. We heard this verse the other day, that the material miseries in this world, which is superfluous to the living entity, can be eradicated or can be countered immediately by the linking process of devotional service. But the majority of people do not know this. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva compiled this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is light to wake us up or to show us the way in this age of Kali particularly. And Lord Chaitanya specifically said we should hear Srimad Bhagavatam from a person Bhagavat, not just read it, but we have to hear it from one who knows. And that is why Srila Prabhupada dedicated his life so much to giving us the Srimad Bhagavatam. He sacrificed his life to give the world the pure message of Srimad Bhagavatam, because this alone can wake us up for whatever condition nature we're in. However we perceive the world, we can know one thing's for sure, it's not correct. But by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, our intelligence, our perception, everything can become clear. Our minds can become clear. Our consciousness becomes clear. And we become clear of the pernicious effects of material existence by associating with Srimad Bhagavatam, by associating with the holy name, by associating with the Lord in this form. And the Lord only reveals himself through the presence of a Vaishnava. He doesn't directly do that usually. It's through the Vaishnava, by pleasing the Vaishnava, by serving the Vaishnava. Krishna sends his pure devotees to this world to give us that opportunity. And by their mercy, we get the association of Krishna in various forms, in the sound form, in the service form, in the prasadam form, so many ways. And they try to help us to constantly keep that association. How to see the world in relationship with Krishna. Everything in relationship with Krishna. And of course, after Vidura had strongly spoken to Dhritarashtra, Dhritarashtra at last woke up and he left home and never to turn back again, along with his wife, his chaste wife. They dedicated the rest of their lives to becoming freed from falsity, although there and then they didn't attain pure bhakti, but they came to the stage at least of dhira, of becoming sober and not intoxicated by thinking that the goal of life is to satisfy my senses. It is not the goal of life. The goal, indirectly, we could say that happens, but the goal of life is Krishnendriya, to satisfy the senses of Krishna. And that is what a sadhu does. He teaches us how to satisfy Krishna's senses and not kamasya not to satisfy our own senses. That's not the goal of life. That's not what the sadhu teaches, to fulfill our material desires. He teaches us how to become free of this tendency to want to fulfill our material desires and to satisfy the desire of Krishna. So we need that association, sadhus. And what can you say? Srila Prabhupada's whole life was dedicated in this direction to pleasing the will of Krishna, and specifically when he came to the Western world to bring Srimad Bhagavatam, to bring the holy name to the world, the pure name, the pure Bhagavatam, so that we could have the opportunity at least to become purified by exposing ourselves to that transcendental sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and the holy name and so on. The transcendental sound which has penetrated into or entered into this world to give us this association. Krishna has appeared in this way to give us his association, but he only comes through the pure devotee. He doesn't reveal himself independent of that. He comes easily in the heart, as Vidura is being addressed, because you carry the personality of God in your heart. Therefore, you are holy. You are a place of pilgrimage. And wherever you go, you convert that place into a place of pilgrimage. Places of pilgrimage, tirthas, they are there to try to change our consciousness, just like a place in the mode of ignorance conditions us to the mode of ignorance. We become drunkards or whatever, licentious personalities, etc. In the mode of goodness, we may start developing a little bit of compassion, material compassion, appreciation, and so on, but it's still material. But the pure devotees, they create an environment, a tirtha, which is transcendental. Just by coming into the atmosphere, Prabhupada wanted our homes, our hearts, our temples to be like that. So anyone who comes in contact with us wants to also enter into that. They want to follow the path which evolves in that sacred space, so to speak. So this is the great mercy of a sadhu. He gives us his opportunity to enter into the spiritual realm. Otherwise, in this material world, there is no way that the conditioned soul can get out of this material world. There is only one way, and that is by the mercy of the sadhu. And we have to take that mercy by associating with the sadhu. Then all of the pernicious effects of this material world will be removed. So this is tomorrow. Now on Saturday, Krishna willing, we'll be having, you could say, the primary verse in this section will be coming on Saturday, the most famous verse in this section, and we may cover it in a few sessions to some degree, whatever. But it's such an important verse in our Krishna conscious movement, in our efforts to become servants of the devotees. This verse is essential in fulfilling all these purposes of getting out of material consciousness. So I'll stop there. Any questions? Hare Krishna.
Yeah, there's 3 questions for you.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Sorry, we're a little bit tired today, as usual. We're a little bit more tired than usual. But we also have to become tired or sick of this material world. Queen Kunti says only those who are materially exhausted, but I don't think it means the type of exhaustion which I'm feeling right now, which is a physical exhaustion. It's exhausted of trying to enjoy this material world when we come to realize that's not my business and there's no real satisfaction there of the soul. Real satisfaction of the soul. Yatma suprasidati is when we're engaged in hoitikiya patiyataya yatma suprasidati in devotional service, which is unmotivated and uninterrupted. Then yanatma suprasidati, we can become satisfied. Giving everything, sadhu, without attachment, enough or need. Can you help me decipher that?
Right.
Giving everything.
I don't know what these terms are.
More need, higher realization, shakti. Giving everything without attachment. Is that enough, maybe? Or do we need higher realization? Well, we certainly do need to come to a shakti. Only one who's at the stage of a shakti is genuinely not affected, we could say, by these material impediments or these pain, miseries of this. When we say miseries of material, we don't just mean that which we define as misery. When we say kleshagni, we hear kleshagni and from Goswami, frees one from all material suffering or misery. It refers not just to the actual experience of suffering, pain. It refers to that which causes suffering, pain. Yeah. It's not just a surface cut down. It removes the roots itself. So when it's a shakti, the stage of complete attachment to Krishna, then these effects they don't have any effect, even if they're there in some trace way, a sniff, but they don't have any effect. Because when it's so much attached to Krishna, so yes, we certainly do have to come to a shakti, but the process of coming to a shakti, which is, you could say, giving everything without attachment. Well, when we say without attachment, then what do we mean by without attachment? In the Bhagavad Gita, what is that verse in the 6th chapter, the first verse? I've slipped my mind. 6.1, you can find it. I know it very well normally, but now I'm like Dhritarashtra. I'm getting to that stage of Dhritarashtra. My memory is teeth are falling out and the memory is fading, so on and so forth. Here it's gone great. 6.1. Yes, thank you. Anashita karma palam karyam karma karotiya sasanyasi yogi chatriya. It's not that we just give up this material world and is actually becoming detached from the fruits of the work and not thinking that they're mine, my enjoyment, but performing our activity without attachment. And ultimately, we have to perform the sacrifice for the pleasure of Vishnu. And this is the part of the process, part of it. Ultimately, it's the mercy of Krishna, but it's part of the process of coming to a shakti. We offer without attachment. In the beginning, we may be attached. We're a little bound up, a little attached to karma or jnana. But we have to come to the platform where our devotional services are not in the attached platform, but with the the platform attached to Krishna or his pleasure. In the beginning, we're thinking of my pleasure usually. But as one advances under the direction of the pure devotee of the Lord, so it depends which stage we're on. We don't start on a shakti. We start on serving somebody who's on the platform of a shakti or even higher bhava bhakti, prema bhakti, whatever. Shakti is almost always included in that, of course, but they're on a more advanced stage. By following in their footsteps, they're not going to start telling us to, that you don't have anything, you don't have any material desires, don't worry about that, just here, just practice pure Raganuga Bhakti. They don't do that. They're going to give us guidance according to our situation so that we can progress and gradually come to the platform of being detached or not attached to the fruits of our work and so on and so forth. We may not be attached to Krishna in the beginning, we're just attached to the service. We're attached to the devotees, we're attached to sometimes fruitive results, we're sometimes attached to being recognized. This is known to the pure devotees, but they continue like a loving father guide us, sometimes chastise us, sometimes re-engage us, sometimes do various we get frustrated. The Lord sometimes frustrates us when we have this attachment. You can read this in several places in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, chapter 20. I can't remember the verse, but when a devotee who has faith in Krishna in devotional service, but is still attached to material things, the Lord gradually takes these things away. Don't give up, don't become depressed. It takes time before we become to the real stage of Shakti. Means there isn't any affection for anything else. One's affection is absolute for Krishna. But to come to that platform, there are stages. Our attachment may be for some aspect of devotional service. Very good. We're moving forward. It may be an attachment, maybe a little bit pride, maybe there to the rules and regulations. Something is there. Attached to getting up early in the morning. Very good. Attachment to worshiping. All very good. It's all a part of our moving progress in the stage of bhajana kriya, so we gradually get freed of attachment to unwanted things, or engaging in unwanted things, so we become steady in our practice. And when we're steady in our practice, we'll start to actually get a genuine taste for devotional service, and not just for the effects of devotional service. And then we come to a Shakti when we become actually attached to Krishna. And then there's no effects of the modes of material nature. They won't affect us anymore. Sometimes when we say misery, it's the Prabhupada was using modes of nature. They're not so much the effects, but the modes of nature themselves as being, pernicious. We have to get freed of the effects of the modes of nature, not controlled by the modes of nature. So one is on a Shakti, is not controlled by the modes of nature. Until we're on a pure platform, a purified platform, there may be effects of the modes of nature, but gradually, there's a means to reach that platform of attachment or Shakti to Krishna. Please, yes, I will have to, okay. Next one. Please. Krishna. I'm living in temple, but due to my old anarthas being infected by some lower modes, sometimes I hurt the sadhus by my words. Although you're told to associate with sadhus, but I feel disheartened when I hurt sadhus due to my association with the modes. I try to get rid of such habits since long time by serving them and asking forgiveness. Can you please guide? I sometimes get disturbed with it. I never want to hurt them. Am I able to advance only by their association? This comes from Jabi Bag Hare Krishna. A very humble honesty. At least we're recognizing our condition, that we sometimes hurt the devotees because of our conditioning, whatever our conditioning is. What do we do? How do we overcome this? Well, recognizing it is one first step, which you humbly, obviously do. And you're trying, you're asking for, please forgive me. This is a major aspect of making progress in this direction. Our attachments may be quite deep, or I say their conditionings may be quite strong. But by the mercy of the sadhus, the devotees, if they see our sincerity, they will help us to move forward. Prayer, we pray intensely, to become free of this tendency to find fault in other devotees, to be envious of other devotees, to be angry towards other devotees, whatever it may be, that is inappropriate to the cultivation of pure bhakti. Whatever it may be, so that our heart may become soft. You can repeat the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj to Lord Nrsimhadev. Om Namo Bhagavate Nrsimhadev Tejasi Virabhava Vajranaka Vajra. Please cut out these dirty things in my heart, these conditions in my heart. Serve the devotees as best we can. And what else to say? You're speaking on my behalf. Practically speaking, this is how I feel. Sometimes, occasionally, not like you, perhaps you'll feel always like this. This feeling of envy towards other Vaishnavas. anger towards other Vaishnavas sometimes is there. Takes time, can happen in a moment by the mercy of Krishna if we really are sincere and pray. It will happen. It will happen. It will happen in time, for sure, if we're sincere. If we're sincere. Try to share this message and glorify the devotees. I remember one time in Malaysia, one godbrother, he was a very sweet devotee. He's a very sweet devotee. And sometimes devotees would come and they would start talking about somebody in a negative way. And he would immediately start glorifying that devotee. How wonderful they are. Find the goodness in other devotees. See their goodness. See a way that you can please them. Some way. Try to change our, let's say, our relationship with them in our hearts. See the good. Everyone has got some good. When Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was hearing one time about, from a devotee who was complaining about another devotee, this, that, the other. After some time, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, can you see nothing good in them? Can you see nothing good? They say, well, they're a good mridanga player. Why you don't talk about that? Try to find the good in others. When we see these faults in other living entities, we think we do. When we get angry, it's another opportunity to look within. As you rightly say, the fault is within. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj many times would mention this: when faults in others bewilder and delude us, look within. Pry not into the frailties of others. Look within our own hearts. It's a reflection of our own hearts. We're actually becoming, when we become angry with others, there may be some occasions when anger can be used, but when it's anger towards other devotees for whatever reason, in one sense we're becoming angry with ourselves. We're becoming angry with Krishna. Try to see it from another perspective, not just them and us. Try to see things in relationship with Krishna, not just how we see it. The whole purpose of the Shastra, of scriptures, is to learn to see things in relationship with Krishna. Sometimes the devotees, and we may not be so elevated perhaps, but they may not correct us. They may just tolerate, because a devotee, a humble devotee, thinks, oh, you're correct, you're right. Yeah, I deserve to be shouted at. But that's not how we should see it. We shouldn't see it like that. We should try to see it in relation with Krishna. This person is very dear to Srila Prabhupada, very dear to Krishna. How fortunate am I to get their association? And if they're a little more, we may think they're a little bit more fortunate or advanced. We should be very happy that we have this opportunity like this. We should, a little bit of self-reflection is required, and internal prayer. If I live far from a well-organized temple, far from traveling preachers, what can I do for finding how to associate with such sadhus from distance? Yes, in one sense, many of us online today are probably in this situation in one sense. Prabhupada did say, seriously, you read my books, you become the association. We have to take shelter. That's why one of the reasons Srila Prabhupada put so much emphasis on book distribution, to give everyone the chance to associate with Vidura and with Narada Muni, and of course with Srila Prabhupada, and with so many great personalities, with Arjuna, and ultimately with Krishna, to give us that chance to regularly read, whether it's alone, with others, whatever we can do online nowadays, but to somehow or another keep that thread of associating with pure devotees through hearing. Even sometimes we live in a well-organized temple, and there are saintly persons there. We don't take advantage. We avoid the opportunity, even still. I know temples which are, in one sense, maybe well-organized, and to a certain extent. But many of the devotees there do not attend the temple functions. They don't take advantage. And sometimes devotees living a long distance away are taking more advantage of that association. But in Krishna's arrangement, perhaps part and parcel of the present situation, we have modern technology which gives us a chance to go on Mayapur TV and so many other channels where we can hear, where we can associate, where we can communicate, etc. And Krishna will send. He will send. He will give us his mercy. And when the time's right, we will get that association also. The association may be there sometimes, we may not recognize it. Take advantage of whatever is available, and then Krishna, surrender to what is available, Krishna will give them more. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So what can we say? Try to take advantage of whatever is available. And of course, we all, from time to time, whenever there's an opportunity, we try to go to places to get surcharged, the holy dham or a temple which has more spiritual vibration, more spiritually minded persons, etc. Whenever we can, we invite for a grihasta, and even in regards to today's verse, actually, some commentary would describe that for a grihasta devotee, it means when they stop trying to invite mundane or materialistic persons to their home for the sake of interacting on a material platform, and develop the ardent desire to invite sadhus into one's home. Invite devotees, call devotees, beg for devotees, please shower your mercy upon me or upon us. Please come, or whatever it is. Now we're mostly online, but please come. And please, and not just come to eat and come to, pat the baby on the head and just, satisfy all my material needs and give me material blessings. No, but please come and correct me or guide me, enlighten me, deliver me, whatever it is. I'm fallen in this abyss of material ignorance, as Devahuti stated. So desire, sincere desire to associate with the sadhu needs to be cultivated. You have to ask for it. Is there a difference between harsh words and sharp words? Yes, there is. Of course, harsh, people may interpret them differently. But harsh words which are based upon one's own false ego, basically, their harsh words generally hurt. Sharp words, well, again, materially speaking, there may not be any difference. I'm taking it to be a difference between material and spiritual here. That may not be the difference by, we would say, dictionary definition, but taking it in terms of harsh words. The word harsh may be used because it's seen as harsh by persons who are in the material world, but it's not harsh from the spiritual speaker's point of view. It's out of love and compassion that they are speaking strong words because they want us to become pleasing to Krishna, and they feel very almost angry that we're hurting ourselves by not serving Krishna. They're so sad to see that we're hurting ourselves and not giving pleasure to Krishna, and not giving pleasure to ourselves because we're part and parcel of Krishna. So they may speak strong words, and when harsh words don't necessitate. Sharp words means cutting words. Harsh words can be generalized. Sharp words are generally specific, like Viduras. Your teeth are falling out. Your hair's gone grey. You're losing your memory. Your hearing, you're becoming deaf. Your throat is becoming choked up. Your vision is gone from birth. Wake up. You're living in the house of your enemies, practically speaking, or at least the soul of like that. Eating the remnants of Bhima, who killed your sons, whom you tried to poison. What is this, you fool? Get out. They're very sharp, very pointed words. Effective, very effective. They're very effective. So from a sadhu's point of view, he doesn't speak anything unless it is in relationship with Krishna. It's not on his own behalf that he speaks. He speaks for the pleasure of Krishna, whether it's harsh, sharp, call it what you may, or sweet. Sadhus don't just speak harsh words. They speak words which will awaken our Krishna consciousness. So in many cases, most cases, it's not necessarily harsh and sharp. Depends again. Some people, when you listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures, those who are in devotee mind, they see them as being, Prabhupada gives the example there of the cat. When the cat has the kitten in its mouth, the kitten feels great. And when the rat is in the same mouth, it feels awful. So some people hear the same words. And one person feels them as being nectar, another feels them as being awful, terrible, insulting. Doesn't want to hear it because what to say, because we're hiding, because we're duplicitous, we're hiding within our shells. We don't even know it, but we're covered up in this illusory shell, and we don't want anyone to penetrate our shell. So it's very painful when somebody tries to do it, but it's only out of love. It's not like it's described how a devotee has no enemy. But then we see there are many enemies of devotees. But the devotee doesn't have an enemy. People may think that the devotee is their enemy. It's the other way around. So it depends on the receiver, whether it's sharp or harsh, how they take it. But it's not sharp or harsh from the sadhu's point of view. It's out of love and compassion that they speak. It's not based on their own anger for the person or their own frustration or their own, somebody getting in their way, not respecting me or whatever. It's based simply upon the will of Krishna. As we know it, it's one of the offenses to preach to faithless persons. How we conclude Vidura attempt to preach Dhritarashtra, who is not blind only physically, but spiritually as well. Well, the time comes for everyone. Yes, he was the elder brother, younger brother rather, of Dhritarashtra. And he was also in the court. So many times he had to give advice. And Dhritarashtra, I want to say, he was associating with his family, who were his sons and other members who were, antagonistic or negative towards Krishna and towards the Pandavas, etc. But his natural affection of Vidura towards his elder brother, he wanted to deliver him from his perilous situation. Always he was trying to wake him up. And yes, you're right, he didn't succeed up to that point, you could say. But in this case, he's come back, and it's Yudhisthira who is inciting Vidura. Please, Yudhisthira wanted to hear from Vidura. So Vidura took advantage of this. All the members of the Kauravas, whoever was there, Pandavas and whoever was there in the palace, they were all hearing the words of Vidura. He was speaking for everyone. And Dhritarashtra was ready. That point of time had come. We may not be able to imitate Dhritarashtra, Vidura, in the sense and expect that we can speak to someone in such a condition they may not wake up. But Vidura was no ordinary person, as we know. And the whole situation is somewhat different. But at this point of time, Dhritarashtra was at his last stages of life, so he managed to penetrate through. Preaching to the faithless, it means many things. Prabhupada describes that it also means giving initiation to persons who are not following, who are not sincere to follow. Also preaching to the faithless. So he was ready. Dhritarashtra did have affection for his younger brother, Vidura. So the time was ready for him to cut that knot. The knot was previously he tried, but it didn't work. We may try, but in this particular case, it was ready. The knot was ready to cut, so he cut it. But by Krishna's arrangement, sometimes these situations are there. We can learn from both sides there. He wasn't able to change Dhritarashtra because at that time he was influenced by his family members, his children, and other members of the court. So the words of Vidura were not accepted by Dhritarashtra. But at this time, Dhritarashtra is now in the court of the Pandavas. The Pandavas association is there. His sons are no longer there, of course. And now is the right time. He doesn't have any association to refer to take him otherwise. So now is the time. Next one. Engage in devotional activity to keep us busy. The sadhu inspires us with festival pastimes. Example for Panihati. We were inspired to offer and distribute chip rice. For Lord Jagannath, one of the offerings is Kaja sweet. Do you know of any story relating to this sweet preparation? No, not really. You can find out, I'm sure. There are unlimited, wonderful pastimes of the Lord reciprocating with his devotees in various ways and enlivening his devotees. Festivals are so important. Of course, the festivals, sometimes we forget the goal of the festival. It's not a social event from the material point of view. It is a festival to please Krishna by offering him what he wants, by doing what he wants. That's why, like with this Chiradori Mahotsav, we offer chip rice, etc., or for Lord Jagannath on certain occasions, we offer Jagannath tongues and various other preparations, sweet, very sweet cakes. When he's having his Snana Yatra, at that time we offer sticky cakes, sweet sticky cakes to the Lord. It's a big, every day is a festival in daily worship. What the different dress the Lord likes, the various sounds he likes to hear, the various pastimes, the various moods, the various festivities, the various foods, the drinks, everything. It's a festival constant, but I don't know, I'm afraid, the details of that particular offering to Lord Jagannath for his pleasure. But I'm sure there is. We may have heard it, but memory is definitely not picking up on it. But look it up. That's how you become enriched. That's how we become. And you're right to ask, but I'm not as advanced as Google Guru. Google Guru is very advanced. He can probably give you the answer. Just ask Google Guru. He'll probably give you the answer. Or some other one, devotee who's more qualified, especially those who are more advanced in Krishna consciousness, who have deep affection for Lord Jagannath. There are books on Lord Jagannath, maybe there you will find, etc. If somebody knows it right away, they can pop it up on the screen and we'll read it out. Is that it? Thank you very, very much, everybody. And thank you for tolerating me this evening. I just about tolerated myself. And we hope that all of you will become deeper in our thoughts of how to associate with a sadhu and what the business of a sadhu is. Not just to keep us going in our conditioned state, but to help release us from our conditioned state, to help us become pleasing to Krishna. Because they live for Krishna's pleasure. And in their association, we can develop that mood of living for Krishna's pleasure. They may manifest it according to our condition in different ways, but in every way they live for Krishna's pleasure. And let's take advantage. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Have Kirtan. Finish for this evening. Saturday, 10 o'clock, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock France time should be good. Oh, please, from the bottom of my heart, please pray to the Lord on behalf of His Holiness Bhakti Maharaj, who, as you probably know, is in a very critical health condition right now. We know it's between him, Srila Prabhupada, and Krishna, whatever they want. But from our point of view, at least from my point of view, we need the association of such sadhus, such saintly persons who dedicated their lives to spreading the holy name all over the world. We need their association. We need their, we're not, at least I speak for myself, I'm not so advanced. And I would request other devotees to also please. It's not that we're saying Krishna, keep him, make sure, we can't force Krishna. We reveal our hearts, so we beg for your mercy, Krishna. We need his association. Please shower mercy on the world of aspiring devotees and those who haven't realized it yet. And if nothing else, just chant more. Nothing, even if you do that, chant more chanting, more hearing, more kirtan, more prayers, more chanting. It brings us all together with a point of our lives in the center. We're here for Sankirtan. We're here to glorify Krishna. And that is the effect of a sadhu, even in critical condition. They're causing us all to think, at least think about it, and hopefully act on it, that we spend more time glorifying Krishna. We realize and get off of the platform of the false ego, get off of our trips that we've all got so many things to impose on others, etc., but to put Krishna in the center and to see how I can become more pleasing to Krishna. And Bhakti Maharaj, even in his critical condition, is causing hundreds of thousands of people all over the world to chant Hare Krishna more and bring us to remember what we're here for. And reminding us, as Prabhupada, or as Vidura said, that imperceptible time is catching up upon all of us. That time will come when we all have to face the final test, so to speak. So teaching us like that and bringing us together with Krishna in the center. And that is the secret in our devotional services, to come to that point of Krishna in the center, in our chanting, in our service, in everything. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada ki Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna Prabhus, glorious to Srila Prabhupada, all of the sadhus and sadhvis who are with us this evening and those who are not. We offer our humble obeisances to all of you and beg your mercy that we can somehow or another one day become a sincere servant to the sadhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, all glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Jai.